Welcome back, TCS TV viewers. Chris Niccolls here, and today we have a very interesting video and something that Jordan and I are really actually very curious about, something very different than what we've normally done. You know, in the store, we've got so many brands of cameras and so many people buying all these different kinds of cameras. And one of the things that gets thrown about a lot is the overall color. You know, we find ourselves always talking about Fuji having this kind of color or Canon having this kind of color. And what we wanted to do was satisfy a curiosity and do a little bit of an experiment today on our show. So as you can see, I've got many different brands of cameras. Now, before we go any further, I do want to talk about the cameras we have here today. Nikon D500, Olympus Pen F, Panasonic G85, Fuji X-T2, Canon 80D, we've got the Pentax K70, and the Sony A6300, all basically the latest in their sensor technologies and sort of APS-C and micro four thirds lens mounts. What we want to do is just take these top cameras that a lot of people are going to find themselves buying with the, the latest sensor and firmware, and then also throw in here an iPhone 7 Plus. And we're doing this because, of course, this is getting a lot of buzz. This is the latest one. We don't own one of these, so thank you to our loyal viewer, Wade, for letting us borrow his. That's a lot of trust there. Because the fact is, guys, we're not going to be doing some sort of scientific lab test. I mean, that's what DP Review and Imaging Resource and, those people do very, very well. What we're kind of interested in is more at the store level, everybody kind of saying, yeah, I love this color or that color's crap. And, we got to remember that most people out there, if you're doing something commercial or professional, or if you're an enthusiast, you're going to shoot raw and you're going to change it afterwards, and then it's all over the place. And on top of that, we got to remember that color is subjective, and this is going to get controversial. I don't know if you guys see the same red that I see here when I look at this strap. Probably not. So, what we really wanted to do is approach it from, well, what about the user who picks up one of these cameras for the first times and uses it? They're going to be an auto white balance. They're going to be standard factory set defaults. They're not going to be shooting raw. They're going to be shooting fine JPEG. And we just kind of want to see what kind of image quality do we get? What kind of general look do we get out of these cameras if we don't mess around with anything? We're not going to change anything here. Now, for our first test, we are going to do a little bit of a landscapey kind of shot, but it is somewhat contrived. And so we have our green little plant right here, and our little plant needs a friend. So let's just go ahead and put Mr. Lichen right over here in the corner. One thing I do like about today, though, is that the light is very consistent, and that's key when you're outside and you're trying to test color amongst all these cameras. We're not going to get some changing color patterns as we go through all of these shots. I should also mention, same aperture, ISO, and shutter speed for each of our cameras here, except, of course, the iPhone again. Adobe RGB for everything, and keep in mind, everything is factory reset to default. As far as color goes, we're turning off dynamic lighting. We're not using any sort of vivid profiles or anything like that, just what the camera shoots as its standard or natural profile, and we'll just see where the chips fall. Should be fun. All right, so I'm shooting the Sony A6300, and it's interesting. I've always liked Sony color. I found it very realistic in its representation, but overall, a lot of people tend to dislike the Sony JPEGs, so hopefully after this we'll find out why. All right, guys, so we're shooting the Pentax K70 now, and it's interesting because they're DNG being so easy to import and everything and, edit all the time. I can't remember the last time I've really taken a Pentax JPEG. They might be stunning, they might be horrible. We have absolutely no idea. But looking on the screen with our standard settings, we're getting a very good exposure. It's matching up with the meter. So overall, color looks nice. We'll find out. All right, so we're shooting on the Olympus Pen F, which is actually said to have Olympus's nicest color arrangement and their nicest sensor. And keep in mind, we are shooting on a micro four thirds. Our frame is a little bit different, because of the different aspect ratio, but we're just trying to get the color. Now, people have always said the Olympus color is always a little bit more saturated than normal. And looking at the screen, I would agree with that. It's got a slight magenta hue that I can see, and the colors do look quite rich, but we'll see how it comes out in print. Okay, so I'm shooting the Nikon D500 now, and of course, being familiar with Nikon for a long time, I guess the colors just seem very, very familiar to me and the way I see things. So this is an interesting comparison for me as well, how different they're gonna be. All right, so I'm shooting the 80D now, very similar sensor to the other stuff we're testing, and of course I did really, really like this camera quite a bit. Color-wise, again, it's just off the screen, but Canon have always been famous for having that Canon color, and it's one of the things that our customers have often talked about really, really liking. Just a look and I don't know, a pizzazz, a je ne sais quoi, whatever you want to say about it. I can't see much on the LCD screen, but there is something different about it. I'm shooting on the Panasonic G85 here, which I got to play with in Cologne, Germany. This is like their latest, processing engine and software. And when it comes to customers talking about Panasonic, it's funny, we just don't really get any feedback on the color. People usually like the cameras, they enjoy using them, but we don't get a lot of feedback on the color information and the kind of look of it. So I'm curious to find out. I've used them for a long time. I've always found the colors to be pleasant, but it's interesting to see how this is going to test alongside the other cameras. All right, guys, we're shooting the Fuji X-T2 now, and with the exception of Canon, more than pretty much any other company on the market, Fuji gets touted as having this amazing color and this very unique rendition of color. So I'm excited to see how true and how different it actually is here. But another thing I do want to say is we've always noticed with Fuji, the exposure could be a little bit different from the competitors. Although with our baseline settings, we're basically bang on 0 on the meter, but it does look a little bit dark compared to the others. And remember that if you're shooting RAW, that's fine. I mean, Fuji's have great shadow detail. That might be the plan of the company, but in JPEG, if you have to boost it, well, that's not always going to be such a positive experience. All right, so now here's the iPhone 7 Plus, and we're shooting the 28mm lens. I'm not using the tripod of choice to hold it, because the fact is you're not really going to mount these on tripods, let's be realistic. But I am using the tripod as a point of reference for where it should be and where the lens should roughly be, and the frame is looking pretty close. I'm going to take a photo here. I mean, we're not doing manual exposure because frankly, guys, you can download apps to do that. This isn't our phone. We're not going to mess around with it. And again, most people, this is how you're going to shoot, just straight out on camera. Here we go. To me, the colors look warm, but it looks beautiful too. It's a nice looking shot. So we're back from the mountains, and now we've done a little kind of lab setup here. And you can see the color checker here, but we got some other colorful items lying around here as well to test. Now, we're gonna be shooting the iPhone 7 Plus at the 50mm focal length. We're gonna try to match the frames as close as possible. And it should be noted that we're also shooting under tungsten light. Now, your average person going out and shooting is going to find themselves shooting under warm fluorescent or tungsten quite often inside their homes, like we're doing today, for example, churches, gymnasiums, schools, buildings, you name it. Okay, so we've got our little mini lab testing here done that we can evaluate, but for our last sort of portrait skin tone test, what is it that everybody shoots when they first get a camera? That's right. It's babies. So I'm going to shoot my brand new daughter, Maddie, and we're going to do a whole bunch of tests here, basically under window light with all the cameras. We're going to see how it can handle skin tones as well as that bright red hair and blue eyes, and we're going to take all those photos as well, and then we're going to go and we're going to do a very, very important evaluation with some very special people. So stay tuned. We're going to head over there, and you're going to see that next. So we're about to go into Resolve Photo here and check out the photos that we sent in. They were unaltered JPEGs. We sent in Resolve. These guys are by far our favorite fine art print house in Calgary, maybe even the world. We don't get around that much, but they do such a good job. They calibrate their machines well. They know what they're doing. We haven't done any changes to these JPEGs, but we're going to see what kind of prints we have in here waiting for us. So come on in. Hey, good to see you again, Royce.
Chris, good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you very much for helping us out.
Yeah.
So TCS TV viewers, this is Royce Howland working here at Resolve Photo. And do you have some pictures for us, Royce?
I do. I got them all packed up for you guys here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, we came to you guys to get these prints done. I mean, we've always respected Resolve Photo. I send all my students here as well, and I love the fact that you guys do amazing printing. But tell us a little bit about the shop and why we should trust you with the accuracy of these prints in the first place.
Yeah, so we work for a lot of very high-end clientele here. People who print and have their work hanging in places like the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa, the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. But we make that level of rigor in our printmaking and the level of quality of print accessible to anybody that can come through our door. So any level of expertise, any level of accomplishment in photography, we bring that kind of level of quality to work for our clients.
And that's why we always love to recommend you guys to our students and our clients. A lot of people are just starting out. They just want to get nice pictures to put on their walls. Got some beautiful stuff here around the gallery, but unlike your normal workflow where you're going into RAW and you're doing a whole bunch of processing, getting the photo exactly right, we just handed you some JPEGs right out of camera. I know, I mean, not what you're normally used to, but we want to see what kind of results do we get out of all the different brands. Do they go in certain directions? And while I've got you here, why don't I elicit your expertise and get you to have a look at these photos and tell me what you think for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Bring it on.
Perfect. Okay, so Royce, first off, of course, I mean, we're just shooting these photos in real world situations. We're not looking to do any scientific tests, but you do bring a lot of expertise to this, and you do a lot of photography, a lot of printing on your own here. But when we're looking at these photos, I mean, let's just try to judge them from a point of view of what's most pleasing to the eye. If you were the average consumer, you just went out and bought a camera, you're going to leave this thing in auto white balance, you're going to leave this thing in auto exposure, and you're just going to go shoot family and landscapes and trips. What would you find personally most pleasing out of this? And I'll get you to rank them from 1 to 8, best to worst, what you think does the best rendition and the worst rendition. This was all shot auto white balance, and I was actually surprised right off the bat here of how some of them are coming out warm, some are coming out quite cold. I mean, this is a factor, right? And we talked about color, but all cameras are going to render white balance differently as well.
Every one of them is different, and there's a little secret sauce in each camera. And some of them, if you don't want to have to do the processing work yourself, if you just want something natural that's pleasing right away with a minimal amount of effort, you want the camera to be doing that heavy lifting for you, so you don't have to go in and edit that. So when I look at it, I'm seeing these two here. They look really pleasing.
Nice warm tone.
Light, they're warm. The skin tones, the red hair of the child, the blue eyes are really crisp. They're popping. The two then that I kind of look at as falling behind, I see are these.
Yeah.
These have a real strong color cast to them. They're very cold. There's a bluish, greenish kind of a tint to them.
Almost cyan here.
Almost cyan. It's not a good look in portraiture. So if you're looking for the camera to give you a pleasing, natural, engaging look, you want to normally for portraiture bias on something that's warm or at worst case, neutral.
Now these are all auto white balance. They were all shot also with the exact same manual exposure.
Yeah, okay. And we've definitely got
variety, yeah. Some cameras are
highlights
brighter, some are darker.
are hotter. You know, this one is very bright. I think it's kind of, it feels overexposed even. Yeah, a lot of other kind of little differences in depth of field. You know, the amount of blur, this one's more detailed. So we've got different formats of sensor probably affecting how the depth of field is playing.
This guy knows his stuff.
All right, so we've got some very clear things here that are showing up again, and I think we're seeing some sensitivity to the artificial light that we kind of talked about a little bit in the portrait.
Yeah, now in this particular one, we did something different. We didn't auto white balance the cameras here. We actually did set them to a fixed Kelvin, 3400. You know, at least so they'd all be on the kind of same playing field for what those cameras do for 3400 Kelvin. There's still gonna be some variety. Some cameras, frankly, don't let you do Kelvin correction either.
Yep. Really, I'm going to say here, we've got 3 that emerge as a very clear top, and then the rest of them I would drop down because of the way that they're handling the reds.
All right, thank you very much.
Right.
We really appreciate your expert opinion on that too. Hopefully, I mean,
fun.
does this test make sense to you as far as being able to evaluate this kind of stuff?
Absolutely. You know, people I think are rediscovering print. The first time their hard drive crashes or the first time their website gets hacked and they realize that digital isn't necessarily going to be around that long, people want to have prints. They want to have something that's a long-lasting memento.
Yeah.
So when you have a camera, the print is going to be a leveler of how good your camera is.
Well, the print is really like the proof in the pudding too, isn't it? I mean, if you make a mistake in processing or if you're not having good exposure technique, all the stuff that it takes to make a photo, Instagram's going to hide that, Facebook's going to hide that, the print is going to show it, right?
Yeah, we say everything looks great on Facebook. If you want to know if you've got a good photo, print it, and then you'll know if you've got a great photo.
Plus, I mean, yeah, people are missing out on just having this kind of experience on the wall, being able to look at it. I myself included, so I've got to get some prints in here right away, get those done. You're going to see me again soon, okay?
We'll see you shortly.
Thanks so much
Chris,
for your help.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Russ.
Cheers.
Take care. No, don't rate them in terms of cuteness. No.
So when I was sorting this, I kind of found myself being biased to a couple different things. It's very personal. One was color pop, just straight out of camera JPEGs. It seems to matter to me quite a bit. And the other factor was white balance. I'm a little bit more partial to kind of a cooler tone. So I did rate, you know, the warmer photos a little bit lower just for myself.
All right, TCS TV viewers, the results are in. We've tabulated our results here and finding some very interesting stuff. We're gonna go through the portrait first. So number 1, the camera that most people enjoyed the color out of was actually the Nikon camera. Second was Canon, that was very consistent. Everybody really did dig that photo. And third, actually, and quite surprising for a lot of us, was that Pentax was actually the third favorite for skin tones. And it seems that people seem to have a bias towards the warmer kind of look on these. Nice color, nice contrast. Interesting enough, the one that did the worst was the iPhone. And I think a big part of that, you gotta remember that people really like the color on the iPhone, but they didn't like the pixelization and the loss of quality, mostly due to the high ISO performance. You know, that picture of Maddie was in low light. The iPhone had a hard time, struggled with that low light, and you get very, very poor artifacting as a result. But also even more interesting is Panasonic and Olympus were also almost the worst camera. And I actually preferred the Panasonic's color over almost all the other cameras. So this is very interesting. It is very subjective and we're getting interesting results, but certainly Nikon and Canon, the big two for portrait work. Now for our landscape shot we tested there, actually the winner was the iPhone, and by a huge margin. So it seems like when this phone is subjected to good light, it does a great job of picking up nice color, nice contrast. Everybody felt that the color was saturated and the contrast was punchy. Second place was Panasonic and third was Olympus. So interesting enough, the Micro Four Thirds dominated when it came to this sort of natural light situation. Worst in the whole thing was Sony, actually, for the landscapes. You know, it did look a little bit flat, a little bit darker. And it should be said, too, that cameras like the Fuji and the Nikon, straight out of camera, do tend to expose a little bit darker than the others. And although that might not hurt you if you're shooting RAW and might just be easy enough to fix and post if you're shooting JPEG, it does hurt you when you're looking at them straight out of box. People felt the photos looked muddy. All right, guys, now when it comes to the lab test, this was interesting because Sony did so poorly in the landscape shot, but they're actually number one. So if you take a look at the file here, nice color rendition, very, very even, very, very clean. We come up into the number 2 place, and that's Nikon again. And Nikon's actually been doing very, very well throughout all these tests, you know, just as we look at the results here. Third place, Canon. People find their color beautiful, nice saturation, good rendition of color. So that's also been very, very good there. What we were also finding, and that's interesting, is the iPhone. It did so well in the landscape shot. Color was great in the portrait shot, but the image quality let it down. And now the iPhone is worst in the lab test. Now, this is going to be a little bit unfair, okay? So let me just let you in on what we did. We did set the Kelvin manually for all of the other SLRs and mirrorless cameras. But of course, the iPhone 7S straight out of camera has no Kelvin adjustment. So using a preset, the color still looked really, really warm. Now I know that you can get apps and download them and get more manual control in the iPhone 7S, but straight out of box, which is what we're trying to test, it just doesn't do well in those situations, and it doesn't have the manual control that an SLR mirrorless camera will have. And that is a serious disadvantage, and it has to be factored in. Okay, so we've got our winners and our losers in each category, but don't let that throw you off too much. You know, what we found very surprising was that there was a lot of inconsistency between cameras as you go from portrait to landscape to lab test. So what we wanted to do then was tabulate this hideous Sudoku puzzle-like thing that we've created here. Of our 15 samples, we added up all the scores. Keep in mind, too, that we have a lot of women in this sampling as well, because women and men do see color differently. We want to get a good, even sample and see that opinion as well. Anyways, lowest score, which means the winner out of all of it, was actually Nikon. You know, they always have delivered good JPEGs, nice accurate color, good warmth, and people did respond to that. A close second was Canon, and I will say that I definitely agree that Canon has a very distinct, very punchy, saturated, very desirable look in their JPEGs, and it's been consistent throughout their whole lineup. Third place actually was interesting because they didn't come close to winning any of the contests other than landscape, but Panasonic actually did very well, third place overall for lowest score. So Fuji came in at 4th place with a score of 200, and this is kind of interesting because we honestly expected them to be really high in this competition or even win it. I mean, you know, 4th place is not a bad score, but Fuji's built up this legendary status for having amazing saturation, skin tone, and color. And we also found that, you know, when we reviewed the X Pro 2 and now the XT2, which is what we used for this particular test, that when we looked at the files, they just didn't quite have the same uniqueness that the old sensors had over the competition. Maybe that's true, maybe they've kind of evened out, or maybe everybody's caught up, but it's certainly represented in these JPEGs, giving them a 4th place score. Now, after Fuji was quite interesting, it was Olympus, and Olympus have very, very good JPEGs. People have always really liked their lens quality, the color out of their files, and we actually found that they scored very, very well for some of the things like the landscape test. But overall, they were behind Panasonic and they were behind Fuji. After Olympus, Sony comes into play. Now, we find the Sony files to be very realistic, you know, very, very natural looking, but realistic and natural doesn't always mean pleasing. You know, generally people like warmth, saturation, and punchiness. Now, to round out the losers in this class, it was Pentax and iPhone tied for last place. Now, again, the iPhone, we were very impressed because most people really liked the color. The main issue was other things keeping them down, like in the portrait test where the artifacting kicks in and just wrecks the shot at high ISO. Or, you know, you look at something like the lab test where they just can't get proper Kelvin color without having special apps to run on them. Overall though, the iPhone delivered good results, and you know, color-wise, people are really responding to those photos, so take that with a grain of salt. Also, Pentax, I mean, again, not surprising. We love the image quality, we love the processing, we love the low light performance they get out of them, but it's never been a camera that delivers amazing JPEGs. Nobody has ever really been amazingly pleased with their JPEG quality. Where people are blown away is when you take their RAW files into software and edit them. That's where they really, really shine. I hope you guys found this test interesting. I mean, as we were going through, we found a lot of surprises, a lot of stuff that we weren't aware of. And again, keep in mind that what we're trying to do here is just show what the JPEGs straight out of box look like and what people tend to find more pleasing and less pleasing. In that regard, I think we got some very good results here. All right, TCS TV viewers, we thank you very much for joining us. We'd also like to thank Resolve Photo for helping us out and printing these photos. We couldn't have done it without them. We'd like to thank all of our sample viewers and photographers. You know, again, big cross-section of customers, staff members, pro photographers, amateurs, professional printers. We tried to get a good cross-section, so thank you to all of you guys for giving us your results. You know, overall as well, the discussion doesn't end here, of course. Tweet us, check us out on Instagram, comment below, talk to us about what you think. Let's have a discussion of how you guys find the JPEGs, and hopefully we can try to keep each other's sexual orientation and mothers out of these arguments. We'll see if we can do that. But you know, let us know what you think about these results, how you perceive your JPEGs, and whatever else you want to talk about. Until next time, see you guys soon.